That 20 unit I mentioned earlier, one of the ones we got off the mailer, we ended up spending $1 million in renovations on a 20 unit, maybe 1.1. And we bought it for 1.25. So we spent almost the same thing, 90% on renovations. And we would, multiple times we've brought the buildings down to zero occupancy. So we've relocated all the tenants, and we pay them moving fees and buy them out of the leases early, just so we can do the construction faster. And we can kind of get through the whole building in less than a year, 10 months maybe, release it out, and then recapitalize the income instead of trying to do it, in phases or slowly. We just rip the Band-Aid off and do the whole thing.
Hey guys, we are here with Brian Green out of Saratoga, New York, who is a ground-up developer of multifamily properties. And you're doing a lot of things I've seen on social media. So I guess for people who don't know who you are, don't know all the stuff that you have your hands in, what's that look like and where you're from? So
like you said, I'm from Saratoga Springs, New York. We're about 3 hours north of New York City. We started buying real estate in 2015. It was kind of a transition time for me around that time. That was right after I was leaving my old business. I used to be in retail prior to that, if you can believe it or not. I used to own Verizon wireless stores. So I did that for 10, 12 years right out of college, sold them all off in 2014, and then just began buying small multifamily properties. And from that point today, we've kind of turned it into me doing it myself and doing a little bit of everything, to my brother and I now being partners. We have just north of 100 total rental units. We're in ground up development, as you stated, redevelopment of existing multifamily properties, short-term rentals. I'm a broker also. So we kind of have our hands in a lot of different places, but everything we do is vertically integrated.
Okay. Wow. Sweet. That's smart. So first I want to take a quick step back. So you're running Verizon stores, like you owned them right out of college?
Yeah.
I didn't even know that people could do that.
I'd love to pull the thread on this one. Let's hear this.
So like half of the stores that you might see, it's probably more than that now, because the Verizon, the national corporation, has been divesting a lot of their stores because, having a retail store at this point is kind of a loss leader for them. So a lot of the stores are privately owned. And when I was out of college, I started working for a guy that was a retired executive with Verizon. And he had a paging company back then. This was in the mid to late 90s.
Nice.
So he helped myself and my brother kind of start into the cellular industry. And my brother actually went on to own and operate Sprint stores. And I went on to do Verizon wireless stores. And then we kind of did that successfully for 10, 15 years until, like I said, I sold my branch off. He continued to operate his Sprint stores, and I got into real estate. So that's kind of
why did you choose like the ultimate like rival? You're like, well, you're
Verizon versus Sprint.
You need to have a natural rivalry as brothers.
At that point, it was kind of, we weren't officially working together within the same business, but we definitely were helping each other. We just figured, those were the two most popular at the time. Actually, at that time, Sprint was by far the most popular in the 90s. Yep. And then it kind of transitioned while we were already owners. So we were actually, we had the kind of the mindset where it didn't really matter which of our stores they came to, as long as they were going to one of us, right? Mm-hmm. If they got dissatisfied at one, they could go to the other. And we just were trying to corner the market in that way. We just loosely kind of helped each other over time. And it just kind of worked out. But it did change at the end, where Verizon was a valuable brand that we were able to sell off and Sprint kind of turned into something else, and it kind of wound down over time. Right. So it was fascinating to kind of see how that transitions through the years that we owned them.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah, that's cool. I guess in the 90s, you were like an early adopter with that at that point then as well. So, I think it was probably a little different, because I imagine that a college kid today couldn't just go and open a Verizon store and be an owner.
No, and to be truthful, I wouldn't be able to either. So I would never be able to do it without our business mentor that had experience with them. He literally knew everyone that was with Verizon in our region. He had hired most of them, and he funded me to get started, and he helped me get my contract with Verizon. So,
wow. How did you find him? Was it like you just applied for a job or what?
No. So it's even stranger than that. So my brother and I both played college football, and he came into our team meeting and was looking for people to work seasonally over the summer to help him support his paging business.
Yep.
And we probably had 80 guys on the team, and the only one in the room that volunteered to work for him for the summer doing like this is like fairs and like the county fair, and like we'd have a table for like pagers, and the only one that volunteered was my brother. He was the only one that volunteered to go work for this guy. And then so he got started, and then like the next year after, because he's a couple years older than I went and started working with him in the stores, and that's kind of how it got started. But it was just a random. He came and asked the team for help, and he's the only guy who wanted to work.
And rose your hand. Wow. So wait, what position did you play?
Outside linebacker.
Oh, so you're bigger than you look on camera. Then you're a big guy.
No, I'm smaller than I used to be.
Oh yeah.
He moves some weight though. I've seen him throwing some barbells around.
Yeah. I still have that part of it in me, but
Yeah. So why did he come to like a college? Is that like how, they're like, oh, we have Scottie Pippen here to try and like sell cars? Was like, we're going to go to like where'd you go to school? Saratoga. I was at Saratoga Community College, but that'd be super insulting.
Yeah. University of Albany.
Okay.
So he came in, I think because, he was retired military. And he had a great deal of success hiring veterans and athletes, right? So
I agree.
And speak to the football team because he thought that was a good source of talent for, the salespeople he was looking for. Honest, responsible, disciplined, that whole kind of mantra. So that's
subservient.
Yeah. That's right. Respect authority. Right?
Yeah. Well, and some local fame probably too as a college athlete. I mean, nowadays, like, Mike and I, our hometown, if you're a Gonzaga basketball player, I mean, now they get paid to do these advertisements, but they're local heroes, right? So there's probably some of that too.
Yeah. I'm from Syracuse originally, so same kind of thing there.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I bet football, like team sports especially, makes sense. You're not going to go hire like the number one like single men's tennis player for that job. You're going to be a prick to all the people that are trying to
be a team player.
That guy's too much of a freelancer, right? He's going to do his own thing.
Exactly. Yeah. Raphael. Yeah. You invite Rafael Nadal, to come and run your pager company. He's gonna have you out of a job pretty quickly when he takes over.
Yeah. Well, cell phones made sure your pager company was obsolete too. So
yeah, right.
I forgot about pagers. I haven't talked about pagers in a long time. Nice.
Yeah. No, that's cool though. So you built that up and you're able to sell out. So that basically give you like a little bit of a nest egg to start getting into the real estate world, because that's always the number one thing I think that everyone struggles with who wants to get involved in real estate, especially with larger assets, is the capital problem.
Sure.
And like you either have to do, kind of like what Dan and I did, where we ground out the capital issue. We flipped houses, we did that sort of stuff to build it up. Or you have to have, a rich partner that's basically willing to fund the money.
Yeah.
Or you have to have like some sort of lucky event in your life that gives you the capital to do that. Or you have to have a high paying job. So it sounds like this is what that was for you though.
Completely agree with what you just said. And I did start off with a bit of an unfair advantage because I had my own capital. But I kind of see that as a double-edged sword, right? Because when you have the money, it can be too easy, right? So you might make mistakes.
Totally.
Just because you have the money doesn't mean you know what you're doing. And like, the first couple, it did allow me to trial by error. Like I bought my first place all cash. Didn't know what I was doing, right? Like I definitely should have financed that. So then like 3 months later, when I figured out I should have financed it, I went back and refinanced it and got my money back. Nice. So and then maybe the second or third one, I know, I overpaid for a property, and I still own today, and it kind of worked out with time, like most real estate does. But I had the ammunition in the bank that would allow me to kind of make my own mistakes and figure it out.
Yeah. What? Sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, you say you have an unfair advantage, but that's just part of playing the game. I mean, you did your time.
Right.
It's not like, you had a bag of gold that like just showed up on your doorstep.
Fell out of the sky.
Yeah,
leprechauns dancing around it.
Yeah. Or you had like daddy's, $100 million trust fund that just going.
Yeah, no, this wasn't. We earned it from the business.
Yeah.
So, it wasn't like an inheritance or something like that.
Yeah, so give credit where it's due there.
Yeah.
So the question I have, Brian, is what made you pivot to real estate? So you sold out, you had your pot of gold from your business. You could have done anything with it. Real estate, like Mike said, is capital intensive. It's not always easy either. Like what in real estate made you say that's where I'm going next?
Well, so let's see. I sold my stores at the end of November, and by March, I was buying my first small multi-property family.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent 3 or 4 months trying to figure out what I wanted to do, just reading, listening to podcasts, and real estate made sense to me. I'm also a guy that has never really worked for anybody else, not since high school or very early on when I started working at the paging store. So I knew I was not going to go get a corporate job. I mean, I'd gone back and got my MBA at night, and I could have easily done that track, but there was no way I was going to do that. It just doesn't fit my personality, doesn't fit my life goals, any of that stuff. So real estate I saw as a way that I could run the numbers, figure out each property, kind of build my own property management company, and just kind of go from there. And that's exactly what we did.
Nice.
Perfect. Yeah. So I guess as you got into that found, you started buying properties. What period of time was that?
2015.
Like what years? 2015. Also pretty recent. Okay.
Yep.
So, I mean, back then you were just going mostly through brokers, I guess, to find stuff. Like I guess when you got started, what was that process like for people? 'Cause that's also the second thing that people always ask, especially with how the market's been the past couple of years, is how do you get started finding properties? Where were you finding your deals?
Yeah.
And, like how did you sort of grow, especially if you parked all your cash in one? It must have taken you a little while to figure out the next steps after that.
So at first I was working with an agent that was referred to by a friend. And, I didn't really know if he was an investor friendly agent or not, but he did take the time to go around and show me some properties. So he was able to just set me up on his automatic feed, and I was analyzing properties on my own just through the education that I had acquired in my background, my degrees in finance. So I'm very comfortable with spreadsheets and all that kind of stuff. So my underwriting was fine. So a lot of the leads early on came from him. And then I think by the time it was 2 years in 17, I got my own agent. I became an agent myself. And then in 19, I became a broker. So over time, I just kind of took that role over myself. But we also started doing direct mail to owners I think I sent out my first wave of letters in like the end of 16 or 17. And surprisingly enough, it's been pretty successful. I got my first one was a 6-unit building. 70-something-year-old woman owned it. She was moving to Florida. She was self-managing it. So, I got, and then later on, I got a 20-unit here in town. And then just recently last year, we got another 20 unit. So we still continue to do mailers because they're hit or miss, but sometimes they come in good.
Can you say that a little bit louder? Because that's our MO too. So our main business is where we have a wholesale business on the residential side. And, we have like a group coaching program that we do as well, the instant investor program. And we always teach direct mail because Dan and we've done well over 100 deals over the last few years. Just off of mailers. And everyone's always a skeptic. Always. But it does work. And when it does work, the people that come through, they're always motivated because they chose to reach out to you.
Sure.
They raise their hand. It's a much better conversation than ruining families' dinners with cold calling and text messages all the time.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys find the same thing too, right? You'll have people call you that might have got your letter 4 years ago and they saved it.
Yes,
absolutely.
Right? I got your letter 4 years ago, and I wasn't ready to sell, but now I'm thinking about it. Are you still interested? And it's like, of course, yes. I think what you said, Mike, that was correct, and I think a lot of people overlook it, or why? Because it's boring, right? It's boring. It's methodical. It's slow paced, but that in reality is exactly what real estate is and what it's supposed to be. It's a long game, right? You have to do those little tiny tedious tasks over time, and then eventually, if one pays off a year, it's worth all of the letters you sent out.
Exactly. And a lot of people too, they don't like it because they're like, I can't believe someone would call you off this letter. Like I would never do that. But like, I don't know. Do you look at like the REI catalog that comes in? It's like the same thing. It's like that is meeting your interest and your need at the time.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
But
So, it's kind of, plus for me, we're so targeted geographically that we only really buy in like our own area. So like when I really narrow down the list from PropStream or wherever to the actual buildings I want to buy, I mean, we're talking about like 400 or 500 buildings. So you could just mail them consistently. I don't have to send out 500 letters, and I just use an online resource to do it. It takes me 3 seconds. It costs like $200, and I can just do it every couple months and change the letter format. It's not really that difficult.
I love that. That's like you're automating it, right? And like the next thing you know, you get a 20 unit, and a lot of people. I would personally mail somebody for a full year every single month if I could buy a 20 unit out of it. That's
100%.
absolutely awesome.
Yeah. And now from those mailers, let's see, the 6 unit is worth over 700,000. The 20 unit is worth 4 million, and the other 20 unit is going to be worth 2 million. So like,
there you go. It's totally worth
all 3
it.
of those properties, I was able to fully burr out of them. So like I have none of my own.
No money into them. That's awesome.
That's great, right? And people too is they always just look at the sunk cost of the marketing because they're skeptics to it, especially if they're new, and they're like, I'm going to spend $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 on this letters, right? And especially because most people are going for like high volume stuff, they want to wholesale, they want to build a large portfolio, whatever, and they're like, well, that money's going out, and they don't feel like it's coming back, but kind of like you said before, it's all about the boring repeated actions. Sure, you spend that $5,000 a month over a year, 2 years, you're $100,000 into your marketing, all said and done. But you've been able to buy $10 million worth of assets. Who really cares at that point? It's such a small line item
with zero money left in it.
Exactly. Yeah. But the upside is so exponential. And it's just really important. So so that's great. So you're working with a broker. You started sending letters. You still send letters.
Yep.
And then I guess how long did you do that before you started getting into the ground up development and the redevelopment?
So our positioning from maybe after like the first couple of properties that I bought, since then and forward, it's always been major renovations. That was the only way I could kind of make the numbers work, because I started caring less about what the property is worth now versus how much it's going to be worth when I'm done with it. So then I was able to make offers based on that after repair value and make sure that it met my financial criteria. So we started doing, I bought a 3 unit, and we would spend literally as much on renovations as we did on the building. And then on that 20 unit I mentioned earlier, one of the ones we got off the mailer, we ended up spending $1 million in renovations on a 20 unit, maybe 1.1. And we bought it for 1.25. So we spent almost the same thing, 90% on renovations.
Wow. That's crazy.
And we would, multiple times we've brought the buildings down to 0 occupancy. So we've relocated all the tenants, and we pay them moving fees and buy them out of the leases early, just so we can do the construction faster. And we can kind of get through the whole building in less than a year, 10 months maybe. Release it out, and then recapitalize the income instead of trying to do it, in phases or slowly.
When we pull the Band-Aid off,
we just rip the Band-Aid off and do the whole thing.
Wow. So how did you? That's a big task. You said you bought a couple properties, but then you got into this major rental stuff. Like, how did you make that leap to now I'm basically running a construction company? Because when you're doing a 20 unit building and your reno budget's $1 million. That's a full-on construction operation. Like, how did you gain that expertise, or where did you go? Like, what was the resources that got you to that point?
To be honest, we kind of just figured it out.
Wow.
I'm an avid reader, so I read all the time. None of it though has to do with projects management or construction, right? It's all business books, real estate books. But we've run successful businesses, my brother and myself, so we know how to manage people. So on that specific deal, my brother had already come on now as a partner. He came on in the end of 2018, I believe. So this was literally like his first property that we were doing together, was this huge renovation. And he's in charge. He's technically our project manager. So he was in charge of managing all the contractors and all the subs and overseeing the budget on that. So it was kind of just a trial by fire. We figured it out, and we got through it. That also coincided with COVID. So we were doing renovations during COVID. And in New York State, they're a little crazy sometimes. Yeah. So like we literally had, we were only allowed to have one contractor in the building at a time.
Oh my gosh. In the building.
One person. So thankfully the complex is 5 4-unit buildings all in a row. So we were able to have one guy in each building at any given time in order to meet their COVID restrictions.
Wow.
That's funny. That's tough with multifamily. So we had similar rules out here in Washington.
Yeah.
But so what you would see is if you're like doing like a flip, they would have like, you can only have one contractor there. You can't do any work. So you would have this group of like roofers and they would just be like, oh yeah, we all own this house and we live in it together. You can't prove us wrong. Like we're so we're allowed to be here.
We're just roofing our own house.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Wow.
Meanwhile, they're all outside, right? So like zero risk whatsoever.
I know.
Exactly. Wow. So when you talk about that, that's you make it sound like it was you just kind of did it, but when you were making those offers too, because you hadn't maybe done $1 million rehab, and you're saying you're basing it off ARV. Did you use any tools or did you get any help to say, hey, I'm only going to pay 1.1 for this property because of my budget's going to be this big? Did you have any clue, or were you just kind of, checking the wind and saying, I think it's $1 million?
No, the number side of it, I'm always on point with. So I knew based on our former renovations and other properties, and I got basically soft bids from some of the contractors we were working with. So I knew what it was going to cost. And
kind of like a per door or per square foot type.
We already had our vendors. So, I was able to calculate out square footage and how much flooring we're going to need. And we're replacing windows and siding and roofs and everything. So we got a lot of those quotes from contractors while we're under contract. So we kind of knew going in. I do think though that our original budget was supposed to be like $850 and we turned into like $1,050,000. Yep. But also simultaneously, which often happens because I'm very conservative on pro forma rents, I think I was expecting that we were going to rent them out. These started off when we bought it at like $750 a unit. And keep in mind, the median in my market for a 2-bedroom is closer to $2,000. So this was like Class C type buildings, but in like a B location is what it was. So I think we were underwriting to get the rents to like $1,050, $1,100 after renovation. And they actually ended up being like $1,250.
Oh, so, right on.
So it really didn't matter. It made up for the over expenditure on the budget.
Your NOI was so much higher.
That's right. Yeah. So I did know how much I wanted to offer. I had talked to this guy for a year through mailers, and just so we negotiated the price down, and it worked out. But I always know the math going in. The math is
for a year. Yeah. So what was your follow-up for a year? Was it like every month you just checked in with him, or you sent him another letter, he called you? What did that follow? Because that is so huge right there.
I think it turned into 3 or 4 different offers that he either turned down or I wouldn't go up as high as he wanted me to. And then in the end, which is funny, and this has happened before, he actually ended up listing it with a broker to sell it. Mm-hmm. But since he and I had been talking for a year, he and I made a gentleman's agreement that, okay, I'm going to list it with the broker, but I'm going to let you see it before it goes live. And if you can match the price, then it's yours. I said, all right, fine. So basically he gave me first right of refusal when he didn't have to. Nice. So the broker got it, and he was like, all right, you got 48 hours, and this is the price. The price was literally $50,000 more than I had offered him. I'm like,
you're like, all right, let's do this.
And keep in mind, I'm a broker, so I'm getting back 2.5% commission anyway. So I'm like, it's basically the same price.
Oh my goodness.
Why did we do this?
I love that though. It speaks to the rapport building, and how Mike and I always preach like how important that is to have that relationship with the seller, because he, like you said, he gave you first right of refusal when he didn't have to. And it sounds like it was a sweet deal for you that you landed where you wanted to anyways.
Yeah. Or I mean, within a percent. And it's something on a 1% of a huge deal like that. So we ended up getting into the contract immediately, and then we were off from there.
Nice. That's awesome. Going back to your renos, one thing I wanted to ask is, you have all those moving parts, you get all the bids and all this sort of stuff. How do you manage all of that? Like, do you have some sort of system that you use, some sort of process? Do you have like a web platform that you use?
So, like I said, now my brother's in charge of that division of our company. So he's the project manager. We've recently brought on a project coordinator who works with him. Mm-hmm. And in the last 6 months or so, we've really started narrowing down our systems for construction. Whereas before, we were very excellent at just property management, because we self-manage also. But that's only because I was starting to do that in 2015. So we had like a 5-year runway. And now we have a property manager also that's separate, but all those systems were in place that we didn't have in the construction side. So in the last 6 months, he and his project coordinator, they built out all kinds of construction timelines using Gantt charts. And now we're working through like budgeting models, and they're getting it down so they have scopes of work written out for each part of the apartment. Like they'll have one scope of work that we use for kitchens and one for bathrooms, and this is exactly how we want it. So we're trying to make it extremely defined so that when we go out to get bids, the contractors know exactly what they're bidding on, and we can kind of compare one quote against another, apples to apples. Whereas before, we were kind of vague on the scope of work. We knew what we wanted, but the contractor doesn't know what we're thinking, right? So they're giving us bids, but one guy's thinking one thing and one guy's thinking another thing. So there was an incongruency there. So we're in a constant evolution of systematizing our construction.
I love what you're saying there, because one thing I do know about contractors, especially on the commercial side, they make most of their profit on the change orders. And so when you're talking about having a clear scope of work and everybody knows from the beginning what you actually want, there's less room for them to say, oh, no, that's a change order. That's a change order, bud. You didn't spell that out. Even though what was unsaid didn't need to be said, you say it so they can't come back and change order you.
Yeah, I mean, a change order is really just an excuse for a contractor normally to increase their price, right?
Yep, absolutely.
They knew they were supposed to do it in the first place, but it's not written on the piece of paper, so now I'm going to charge you $3,000.
Yep.
Yep. Yeah.
So the better off you are at writing your contracts and your scope of work, you get rewarded in that you get the price that you want, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I guess for the contractor, maybe he's making a little bit less, but if he knows exactly what he's doing, he can get through it faster, and he makes up for it.
For sure.
Yep. Yeah. And I think that's a good lesson too for like residential people, because you can take that same principle and take it towards a residential house, and I think that's where a lot of people get bit, is that they don't, they have a contractor that shows up. The guy, he's a high school dropout who's like super smooth talking, he can do the whole thing. He's like, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to do this. Yeah. And then the people don't even necessarily know that the person, the contractor isn't have their best interest in mind necessarily, or isn't even listening to what they're saying, because all he's thinking is, how can I get in and out of this project for as quick, as cheap as possible
and make as much profit.
Yeah, exactly. Especially on the residential space. I think in the multifamily space, it might be a little bit different because, higher price point, like more room for the contractor to bring in experienced people. When you're doing like a kitchen, it's the difference between the guy that's off the streets or like a sophisticated company can be pretty extensive in cost, but not that different in like process.
Sure.
Right. And it's hard to tell them apart when they're next to each other potentially.
Yeah.
But if you have that scope of work that you've built out about exactly what you want the kitchen to look like, what, countertops you want, what kind of cabinets you want, exactly what you want the demolition and process to look like, you're going to come out much better than if you're just like trusting it to a contractor that like promised you that they were going to do a good job and then asked for 75% up front, which for some reason you gave for them. Then
you never see them again. Exactly.
Yeah. The other thing it helps with too, just to build onto that, is I'm still the one that's doing underwriting. So the better we have our scope of works for the contracting side of things, I have better estimates on what it's going to be for renovation, right? So my numbers can be more defined when I'm making offers. Versus me saying, okay, that's 20,000 a unit. That looks close enough. And let's just go with that and punch it into the spreadsheet. Now we're working to the point where we know exactly how much it's going to cost, within 5% margin of error. So it makes us it allows us to be more competitive on our offers.
Yeah, it's a lot less stressful on your part once you do get something under contract. Because if you are experiencing a 20% swing in all of your project costs, you're not going to, as the underwriter, you're not going to be super comfortable. The whole time you're going to be like, oh God, are we going to be under 20 or over 20? Where are we at?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So I guess to stay on the systems really quick, because I think that's super good value for people.
Absolutely.
And this is a selfish question. What are your systems like for property management?
Right. We could use some help there.
Yeah. Because we have 48 units that we own across, it's pretty geographically dispersed around the area. So it's kind of a pain in the ass to deal with.
Yeah.
And we have, by the time this episode comes out, we'll probably have fired our current property manager. Sorry if you're listening to this, but that's the reality.
Yeah.
And it's just been a constant problem. We've been doing this for years. We've tried to bring people in house. We've tried to outsource it, and it just always sucks. Mm-hmm. So what's your secret?
So I used to do it myself, and now, like I said, we have a property manager that works for us. She actually started off doing showings for us. But I always tell her, whenever we kind of get into a spot now where things are going sideways or we have a problem, it's almost always because we made an exception. So I always tell her, exceptions are the death of property management. You cannot make exceptions. So we have strict tenancy standards, right? So if they don't check all the boxes as a applicant, they don't get approved. There is no the story sounds good, I think they're honest. The numbers are either there and the background is there and the landlord reference is there, or it's not. And we kind of tweak those standards over time. So a lot of the work is on the front end with bringing in the right tenants. I've been doing this for 7 years and I've never evicted a single tenant that I chose.
Wow.
Love that. That's awesome.
Okay.
That's right.
So the only people that we've had to evict are, or threaten eviction, are holdover tenants from properties we bought from other landlords who did not have systems and had terrible management. So that's one thing. So on the front end, lots and lots of time on screening of the applicants. And then when they're in the building, they're basically already well versed on what is required of them, how the systems work. Like if they submitted a maintenance request and it's not done through AppFolio, we tell them to go in AppFolio and submit the request. So it's like, you got to teach them what to do at first, and then we kind of have our system and everyone buys in, and that's how we go forward. But same thing with late fees. In New York, we can't charge a late fee until the 5th of the month. There's like an automatic 5-day grace period. So, but we always charge no matter what. Like, doesn't matter what the story is, doesn't matter what the circumstances are. Boom, here's your late fee. We're delivering the papers just like, in-person service like we're supposed to. And like, this is the process and everyone knows it. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, don't make exceptions. Don't cut corners. Just follow the process.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's huge. So what's your portfolio size right now?
We have just over 100 units. So it spreads across 13 different buildings, and we have everything from the original buildings I bought. We're like 3 and 4 units. The largest we have 2 20-unit buildings, and we have an 18-unit building. And then our ground-up development that we're in process right now is going to be 36 units, as well as somewhere between 6 to 8 condos.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, and then your property manager that works for you, do you pay them like a salary, or is it like a gross percentage? A percentage of gross rents, like a typical property manager?
So currently she's on a salary, and we kind of established that. She actually just became our first official employee this year. So we got through
W-2,
not having an employee.
Yeah.
She was an independent contractor prior to that. But now it's just to the point where she's full time, and she's part of our management team, so she needed to be an employee. So we pay her a flat salary, but she does make profit sharing on the management of our short term rentals that she manages.
Oh, so that's great.
She'll get a % of the total sales on our short term.
Nice. Gotcha. That's pretty cool that she's able to do all of that, because we, I guess, technically just in our business have 3 different property managers, one specifically to our short-term rentals, because they are harder to manage, and typical property managers can't manage them. Their systems aren't set up, and I feel for them because their long-term systems are totally different than short-term systems. There's crossover, but the speed at which you have to operate on short-term rentals is so much different.
Yeah, we just kind of basically built all of that out this year. We didn't have a short-term rental until June was our first one, and now we have 4 with the 5th one coming online in the next 60 days.
Wow.
What we're doing is short-term rentals inside of our multifamily buildings. So the goal is to have at least the properties we have that are in the town of Saratoga, because it's a big touristy town. We have the oldest horse racing track in the country. So like in the summer, all of the thoroughbreds come here from Kentucky and all over the country to race. So we have a huge influx of tourism. So our Airbnb business in the summer is great. So we just started building that out over the summer season and now into the fall, where we're doing midterm rentals. But we're in that constant process now. We're trying to figure it out as we go.
Right.
And actually, we're confident enough at this point on the short term that we're going to start taking on new clients the first time we're managing for other people starting next year.
In the short term business?
Only short term, not long term. Wow. Just because, as you know, the revenue and the profit you can generate from managing short terms is far greater than long term.
Oh yeah. Usually we're getting hit with 20% for a lot of people is what they want.
Yeah. And also too, the short-term market is inundated with people who don't know what the hell they're doing, but they just want to be able to like travel to Europe after they bought 3 short-term properties.
Yeah. That's right. But I would imagine there's some opportunity for you to mark up your other services. So say you're just doing a flat 20% plus, then you might be able to mark up your cleaning. You might be able to mark up your maintenance a little bit. I don't know how you're doing. I'm just assuming some of these companies that do it gain quite a few different markup areas because you're constantly turning and fixing and cleaning units too. So yeah, it's fascinating.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we're coming up on time, but before we go to our final questions, I did want to hear a little bit more about your development stuff that you're doing. 'Cause you're doing ground up development now as well.
That's right. Yep.
Just to throw one more thing into the fire of all the stuff that you have going on.
You always have to keep it interesting, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And challenge yourself, right? So this is very exciting for us. So we're buying a property that's just over 2 acres right in town. So it's walking distance to downtown. It has 2 old buildings on it right now, a house and a carriage house, which part of the story here is we're finding out that New York State finds them to be historically significant all of a sudden.
Oh, interesting.
Never in the past, but now, as of now, when we want to build something there, now they're significant.
Of course.
So the current iteration of our plan, we're building a 36-unit apartment complex, but now we're going to keep the house and the carriage house, and we're going to move them on the property. So like last week, you were out there with, I don't know if you've ever seen it on TV where they pick up the buildings and they move them. So we had a guy come out last week who gave us a quote on moving the buildings to one of the corners of the lot. And now we're going to do it as a subdivision, and we're going to separate out the house and the carriage house, which we're going to remodel to historical standards and potentially get 40% back in tax credits on the renovation.
Oh, that's
great.
great.
And then we're going to turn those into condos to sell off, to recapitalize the project. And then the 36 units will be built on the larger portion of the lot right next door. And this will also be the first time we're going to syndicate a deal, because this will be a much higher dollar value. The total project cost is going to be more like $12 million. So it's above and beyond what my brother and I can self-fund. So this would be the first time we're going to bring in outside investors with equity, which is also exciting and kind of challenging for us at the same time. But anyways, our plan is to build the 36 units, refinance it at completion, where we should be able to get a good stabilized value, and then keep that forever, long term, with us managing it, our property management company. And then the condos, we may have to keep it for 5 years, so we may rent those out for the first 5. There's a 5-year requirement in order to get the tax credits, in order to before you can sell it off.
Sure.
So we're kind of still working through that model, whether we want to keep it for the 5 or not. But that'll be a liquidity event for our investors at that point, right? Because they're going to get profit from the condo sale. So I think it's going to be a really interesting and unique project, and we're kind of getting everything out of the way on our first development.
Yeah.
We're moving building, historic renovation. We're building ground up. I mean, it's kind of everything at once.
That's fascinating, honestly. So I have a question here for you. So how did this work for you? I know a lot of people, including myself, it's like, okay, I want to develop a big project.
Yep.
So you found the 2-acre piece of property. Did you just buy that and you're like, okay, we're going to figure this out, and then you happen to be able to get it all the way through entitlement and you're like, yep, we can do this? Or did you do an LOI where you're like, hey, let me just pay you more money on the back end, as assuming we can get through entitlement and we can make these things happen? Because it does sound like you ran into some headwinds there.
Yeah, we still are. We're not approved yet. So we're still working. We've submitted everything to the city, but our city takes some time to get approvals.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
No, our contract, we are under contract on the property and have been since June, but it's all contingent upon us getting our entitlements.
Perfect. That's a huge point for people to understand, is you don't necessarily have to go out and buy this piece of property, pay cash for it, and sit on it for 2 years while you go through entitlements and before you even break ground. That's a really good strategy that Mike and I have heard a couple times now.
Yep. Also, very important too, as a side note, is to make sure you have extensions built into that contract. So we have 4 90-day extensions built in, so we can basically buy ourselves an extra 300, almost a year, by contributing more and more deposit as the process goes along if we need to. Because, as you know, probably I'm assuming in your market too, these things, sometimes the city can drag their feet for a year or two, and you need to have that time so you don't get stuck with the contract.
Yep. And so then how did you get to the point of understanding you were going to be able to build 36 units? What was that? Is that some designation within the local area per square foot of the lot? Or like, how did you get to that?
Yep. So before we even went to contract, we had an engineer take a look at the site survey and interpret the zoning laws in our market. And the way there's just a math calculation, right?
Yep.
You have a certain amount of acreage, and these are the setbacks that are allowed. So they basically turn your giant box of a lot into this tiny little box that you're allowed to build on. And then you figure out how many units you can fit into there. And then the maximum based on the math was 36.
Yep.
But since now we're keeping these historic buildings, it's going to give us, hopefully, if they approve the plan, an increased density, because we're still wanting to build the 36 and we're going to have the 6 to 8 condos.
Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Good stuff, man. You're all perfectly vertically integrated from when we started.
You're kicking ass, man. I love it.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Awesome. Cool. So we're going to dive into our end of show questions here.
Okay.
First off is the crowd favorite. What is your craziest real estate investing story? It's going to be a tenant story, a big win on a transaction, time that you lost a bunch of money, whatever your craziest story is.
Okay. So let's see. One of the projects we're working on right now, about a month after we bought it, we got phone calls from the adjoining tenants that they hadn't seen one of the tenants in quite some time. So, long story short, we had to call the police to check on them, who went in there, and the tenant had passed away. From what we can tell, I don't know, a month ago. So I did not personally walk in and see it, but we got descriptions from the police officer who went in. So I am imagining it was something out of the movie Seven, where he walks in and sees the
guy that's all like
the guy all on the bed. That's
oh my goodness,
with the air fresheners from the ceiling. So it was a pretty bad scene. So, like I said, my brother's in charge of project management, so he had to hire a company to come in and remove the furniture that this guy had decomposed into, and like remove cutout holes in the floor from where everything is soaked in, and it's like a whole thing.
So, I met a guy that's what his company is. There's companies out there, like if somebody gets murdered or somebody dies, that's what they do. Their job is to go clean up blood and guts.
The guy was there for, I don't know, 3 hours, and it was $2,000.
It's a great business.
Oh man.
I mean, I don't want to personally do it, but I'd rather pay him the $2,000.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
That seems to be the most common reoccurring crazy story is dead tenants or occupants or things like that.
I'll add on to that slightly more. Same property, same time period. We had one of our holdover tenants. Our contractor noticed that they were out in the parking lot doing illegal activities with a client of theirs.
Oh,
if you can connect the dots,
right?
In the middle of the afternoon, right? Like on the side of a van.
Nice, right there in the parking lot.
Wow. Yeah, it's just a transaction amongst the adults.
Oh God, so consenting adults.
So you can see why in a lot of cases, there's a need to bring occupancy down to 0% so we can get through it and turn
totally.
Yeah, that's funny. Yeah. I mean, inherited tenants, man, that is always a tough deal. But honestly, too, if you're a buy and hold investor, it's one of the easiest ways to get a discounted property.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
almost all of our rentals that we've bought, and sure, it sucks. You got to deal with them. You got to have them there paying. Not paying rent for 6 months or whatever, but you're taking the headache away from the previous owner. You're solving their problem. Yep. And if you're in it for the long game, the 6 months, 8 months, a year. I had one recently. I just got the lady out. She was there for 2 full years.
Wow.
Before I was finally able to get her out because of the politics that we have in COVID.
Yep.
But now it's worth it, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
It sucked for that period of time. And now I have this nice secure asset and pick my own tenants should be great.
Sure. So, absolutely.
Awesome. That's cool. You're willing to do that because it's always a big thing too. A lot of other investors try to shy away from, but I mean, someone's got to do it.
Yep.
Perfect. All right. Next question. What is the number one tip you would give to either a new investor looking to get started or to a small investor looking to take their business to the next level?
Like I mentioned before, I'm a huge reader. So my number one bit of advice would be to educate yourself on as much as you possibly can. There's in real estate, there's no shortage of books or gurus that are going to tell you how to do this. But I read and listen to everything and anything, and I have for the past 7+ years to kind of get to where I am. And that also leads into my next bit of advice, which would be decide early on if you're going to be a business owner or you're going to be an investor. And what I mean by that is most people that are in real estate should just be investors. They should find properties, underwrite them, hire a property manager, or do it as an LP on somebody else's syndication deal. I feel like way too many people think they're going to just go buy a house and figure it out and self-manage, and that turns into disaster. So you got to decide if you're going to do that, you got to be prepared to create a company, right? You need a company to support your properties. If you don't want to create a company, then you should just invest and you should find somebody else that knows how to manage the properties.
Yep. Man. Yep. I think that's great advice. So book wise, what are your recommendations for people?
Man, I don't know. You asked me that question. I read so much and I get them all mixed up. I think I've read every single Bigger Pockets book there ever was. I read,
Yeah.
not
So
really.
let's say this is a situation. You have a young college graduate that's come and says, Brian, I want to be just like you. What should I read?
I don't know if you want to do that, but
Start selling pagers.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. I like, well, for me, I was one of the ones that decided he was going to build a company, right? So I like, what's it? Michael Gerber's book on, what's his book? I'm losing the title now. The E-Myth. The E-Myth, right?
The E-Myth, that's a good one.
The E-Myth, right? Because it's not specifically real estate focused, but it does tell you how to create an organization that eventually you can sell off or that you don't have to be in day to day. Because the other problem is when you start a company, most people create themselves a job instead of creating a company.
So true.
And to some extent, I'm still in that spot, right? I am required in my own company, but over time, the goal is for me not to be. So that would be one book, because most people think that like, oh, I'm just going to start a property management company. And then like, great, you just gave yourself an 80-hour-a-week job. Congratulations.
Yeah. I know. And I think
if you read that book and you kind of build it from the start, the way he explains, and there's other guys that have written books that are similar, but it's, systematize, hire out, who, not how. It's all kind of the same mentality.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great.
Cool. Great suggestion. Yeah. All right. So last question, where can people find you, follow you, and reach out to you if you'd like them to do so?
Sure. So on our website works pretty well, greenspringscapitalgroup.com. Or we're on Instagram at greenspringscapital. On either of those, they can reach out to me. My email address even is brian@greenspringscapitalgroup.com. They're welcome to send me an email directly if they'd like to learn more about my story or about our development deal that's upcoming or any of the things we talked about today. Happy to help.
Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, Brian.
Perfect. I love it. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Brian. And listeners, if you want to know how to build an awesome vertically integrated real estate investing business, reach out to Brian. He is a wealth of knowledge.
He's a man.
Go find him on social media too. He throws around some decent weight and is looks like in your garage gym as well. So, all sorts of good stuff coming out. Yeah. But anyways, guys, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please go and leave us a 5-star review wherever you listen to your podcast. Also, if you want to start learning how to generate off-market leads, just like Dan and I do, and how to do it, pretty simply, it's not rocket science. Brian does a very similar process that we do. Go to collectingkeyspodcast.com/free, and you can get your 5-step guide to start generating off-market leads in as little as 2 weeks. So thanks so much for listening, everybody, and talk to you guys next week.
See ya.